Hey guys, and welcome to a round of 32 talk, I suppose. The community has been talking about this a lot, so I figured why not jump onto the bandwagon. Two videos are going to be coming out today, and this is the first. I don't have a lot of changes I would necessarily do to the bracket. A lot of people are talking about you have to put record over strength of schedule, but that doesn't make any sense to me, actually. I mean, Death Roll went 4-0 in 2019, but they didn't deserve the fourth seed or any higher. Their strength of schedule, two of their fights, I believe, weren't even showed on TV because they were that unimpressive. They got lucky against Endgame, which really shouldn't be happening considering how weak Endgame was that year. And yeah, they completely decimated Rotator, and that was the opponent they faced that came closest to making it to the top 16, but at the same time, it's not as impressive as a whole when you look at their performances. They could have probably been put even lower than 6th, if I'm honest. And the only reason they were left in was because they were unbeaten. If it was me, might have put them into the win and you're in rounds instead of straight through to the bracket. But that's just me. I could be wrong. Looking at the bracket, the first ones are up at the top: Hydra, Bloodsport, Copperhead, and Uppercut. Now, this is one of those situations. I would not put Uppercut lower because there's more bots that went undefeated, especially considering this year being undefeated meant winning 3 fights instead of 4. That's not as impressive. He had a pretty tough strength of schedule and was very impressive and explosive in both of those fights. So, I think 4th is very fair. But when it comes to who gets the first seed out of these 3, it's pretty tough. I think Bloodsport is in the correct position, for sure. And I would switch Copperhead and Hydra. I think Copperhead had much more impressive victories than Hydra did. Hydra had a boring and weak victory over Huge, barely won over Witch Doctor. So, I would put Copperhead above him for sure. So, our next group of 4 is Black Dragon, Endgame, Sawblaze, and Valkyrie? No, Whiplash. Whiplash, okay. We have other 3-0 machines in Jackpot, Beta, and Mad Catter. If I was going to put any of those bots above any of these, it would probably be Mad Catter, but I'm not entirely sure if that's fair. Black Dragon didn't have a great season. They barely beat Kraken. They lost out in a very dominant display from Copperhead. And I forget, their other fight was Claw Viper, who didn't make the tournament. Not that I think Claw Viper's a bad machine, but just overall, not a great season, so I would definitely put them lower. I would knock Endgame up, for sure. Looking at the others, Whiplash and Sawblaze, that's tough, because yes, Sawblaze got a very dominant victory over Whiplash, but they got completely owned by Uppercut, and their other fight was Rusty, whereas Whiplash came back strong and took out Valkyrie and another machine, I forget, or Gruff, very impressively, which definitely takes a lot of effort. So, I'm tempted to put Whiplash at 6 and Sawblaze down to 7. So then we have Valkyrie, Scorpios, Jackpot, and Mad Catter, I believe, is the other. Yes. I would I would put Mad Catter at 8th. I think we should put him at 8th. They beat out, I forget who their second fight was against, but they beat out Fusion and Malice rather convincingly and quickly, so I would definitely put them higher. Again, I think it's fair that they're behind a number of these very impressive 2-in-1 machines, Endgame, Sawblaze, and Whiplash, but I do think they deserve the 8th seed. I think I would put Scorpios. No, I think Valkyrie should go and stay at 9 and Scorpios at 10. Black Dragon falls to 11 and Jackpot goes to 12. I think that is the fair way to go about it. Then we have the last of our top seeds being Beta, Lockjaw, Fusion, and Malice. I don't know. Beta's 3-0, but it was a very non-impressive 3-0. They beat out, what, Rusty, Rotator in a very controversial decision, even though it wasn't all that controversial, honestly. And, what was the third one? I forget what the third one was, but it was a free pass, if I remember correctly. So I think Beta is about at a fair spot. I might have put him lower if I was in charge, honestly. I do think Fusion's a bit high because they didn't have the toughest opponents as well, so I'm not entirely sure about that one. I forget who their third fight was against, but they had Mad Catter and Aegis. Mad Catter, this is the first time I think they've won a fight in the regular season. I could definitely be wrong. I think I might be wrong, but then you have Aegis who, come on. So that leaves us with then Malice at 16 and Lockjaw at 14. I don't think I'd put either of them up unless you want to factor in the Bounty Hunter series, in which case I might have moved Lockjaw up, but I think that was done after the regular season, so I think 14's about fair for him. Maybe move Malice up and move Fusion down if you want to keep Fusion in the top 16. The next 4 are then Gigabyte, Tantrum, Shatter, and Ribot. Now, at the time of recording this, the first episode of the Round of 32 is coming out, so I will say that. I don't have a lot of complaints with how these guys are actually put in. I think it's pretty fair where they put, maybe move Shatter up if you want. They were pretty solid in all their fights, so maybe put him at 17 if you want, and move Gigabyte and Tantrum down 1. Then we have Tombstone, Witch Doctor, Rotator, and Sub-Zero. Now, I'm not going to talk about Sub-Zero yet, because I have something to talk about him in a bit. But, what about the others? Tombstone, Witch Doctor, and Rotator. Rotator's fight against Valkyrie is what put him here, and I think the controversy that they made surrounding him and Beta, I think they felt bad and knew they had to put Rotator in, so they did. I don't know where I'd put Rotator, if I'm honest. I don't know if I'd move him up or down. Because there's, like, there isn't much wrong with his placement. Like, I think he's in a good spot for himself, and it more depends on, would you move Witch Doctor down or Kraken and Huge up? I think that's the real question. Because other than that, there's not much I really want to change about his spot. Tombstone, I think, should be higher. And I know that seems like a dumb one, but Yes, his only win was... It was an impressive one, but it was against a bot that didn't make the bracket. I'd still say, though, that his fight against Scorpios, I believe he was doing pretty well in. And the fight against Endgame, I'd still argue he'd win, and he just got unlucky after the first collision, getting stuck, I believe, under the screws. So, I think I would probably move Tombstone above Ribot. Maybe. And then Witch Doctor, again, like I said, it depends on if you'd like to move Witch Doctor down or move Huge and Kraken up, really, for their spot. I do think Witch Doctor should be... I don't know. I think Witch Doctor's sitting in a bit of a weird area of being in the tournament. Yes, they deserve that, but seeding-wise, I do think they're a bit high in comparison to Kraken and Huge. Of that group of three, I think Kraken deserve to be the highest, and considering I think he's the lowest, it seems kind of unfair. Because Kraken very nearly won against Black Dragon. They dominated Witch Doctor, and they did a good job for what it's worth against Huge. So I do think that they should be the highest out of the three. Maybe put Witch Doctor second, and put Huge third in it. Then outside of that group, who do we have left? We have Slammo, Hijinks, Mammoth, Hypershock, Gruff, Perfect Phoenix. I believe I said all of them. Perfect Phoenix, I'm not sure where I'd put him. They had an impressive knockout against Extinguisher, and they beat out Adam 94, but at the same time, neither of those bots ended up coming anywhere near making the tournament. And they lost, I believe, pretty convincingly to Scorpios, which was their hardest opponent, so I do think that them being put here is fair. Slammo was probably in a fair position as well for how he did. Mammoth, you could put higher. I think you could put higher. They had a winning record, and they beat out a good bot in Huge, so I think maybe you should move him above Hijinks, Perfect Phoenix, and Slammo. But that brings me to the talking point of a lot of people when it comes to this bracket, P1. So, I'm going to take a look at the 5 bots Coleslaw and Lambrango mentioned, being P1, Gruff, Hypershock, Sub-Zero, and Hijinks. And I want to look at 3 different things. Strength of schedule, record, and what the producers want. And I'm going to figure out the bracket that would most likely have P1 in it. Strength of schedule wise, it's easy to go out and instantly say that the weakest was Hijinks because none of their opponents made the tournament. But I would say it was Sub-Zero. Grabot and Scorponok were probably the worst 2 machines in the competition. And the fact that Jackpot wasn't working correctly in their fight leads me to think just instantaneously Sub-Zero probably has the weakest strength of schedule. At least Hijinks faced working opponents in all of their fights. Maybe Tracer was built incorrectly with the wrong wheels, but I still do believe that Hijinks should probably stay in above Sub-Zero if you're looking at strength of schedule. Looking at record, if you want P1 to move in as well as strength of schedule, you're gonna choose Gruff to go out. Most likely. Because Gruff did have Extinguisher in his schedule. But here's what I'd like to point out. Looking at strength of schedule isn't entirely fair because the bot itself doesn't have a choice when it comes to the schedule. And lastly, the whole producer thing. In the end, BattleBots is a TV show. And they're gonna choose their big names. They're gonna choose unique designs. They're gonna choose fan favorites over record, over even on occasion, strength of schedule. Hypershock makes it because it's a fan favorite. Hijinks makes it because it's got a really unique design. Sub-Zero makes it because this is the best season that they've ever had. The only decision that you have in the end would be Gruff. If P1's coming into the bracket, Gruff is getting knocked out. It's the only one that makes sense, but because P1 had a fight not shown on television, Gruff would make it in instead. Producer-wise, you're gonna want a name that you've seen more often, that the fans have come to know more, that you've put in multiple main events, and that's why Gruff made it in instead of P1. P1 may have had an impressive showing against Smee, maybe one against Kronos, but that's the thing. They just weren't shown to us enough. They died in 2 hits against Copperhead. The only time we really got to see him was against Smee. 1 fight out of 3 is not enough, and as a producer, you're gonna choose Gruff, Hijinks, Sub-Zero, Hypershock over P1, simply because the fans have seen them more. Hypershock deserves his spot. Gruff deserves his spot. If you're looking at bots that don't deserve him, you'd look at Sub-Zero and Hijinks, but the fact is, looking at it as a producer, you're gonna have to decide between more P1 and Gruff than you will P1, Sub-Zero, and Hijinks. In the end, Gruff deserves his spot. Does P1 deserve a chance? Arguably. If you wanted to make the fans happy, you should have done a win and you're in between a lot of these lower tier bots. Between maybe the, I don't know, 26 to 32nd seeds and a number of the other bots that could have made it, like Captain Shredderator, P1, and Tracer even. That's just the thing. People were never going to get happy with a bracket like this. The pandemic has caused it so that the bots don't have as many fights. Imagine if these machines had had their 4th fights. Imagine how different this bracket could have looked. Say, Tombstone picked up another win. He'd probably get jutted up to the top 16 seeds. Say, a loss came Mad Catter's way, and he might get pushed completely out of it. So, unfortunately, that's all it is. As a show, P1 isn't gonna make it. If he had another fight and managed to pull off the victory, maybe, but he didn't. Fans are gonna be disappointed in a bracket like this. It's maybe not a rushed season, but it's an incomplete season. And unfortunately, there isn't much more I can really say about it. P1 was people's biggest loss when it came to the round of 32. They had the best record, they put up a good show against Smee, but they just, as a producer, weren't good enough. As a producer, it's always going to be the argument, P1 or Gruff. And you're going to choose Gruff, because the fans have seen more of him. He's fought in 2 main events. He was doing pretty well in both main events. I wouldn't say he was necessarily on top against Whiplash, but he was at least in the fight the whole time. And his Extinguisher loss can be pitted down to a bit of bad luck. P1 got owned against Copperhead, which was its big test fight. If it put up anything more of a fight, if it managed to last 30 seconds longer with a single attack, then yeah, it probably would have made it in. But that's the thing. The loss to Copperhead that quickly is what killed the killed P1's chances. P1 needed to do better. They needed a much more impressive performance than they did. They needed to show against Copperhead that they can at least last 30 seconds against the top tier, and that's something they didn't do. In the meantime, Gruff had his top tier opponent last season in Tombstone, who he took the full 3 minutes. And he had his top tier opponent this year, which was Whiplash, who again, he took to the full 3 minutes. Maybe he wasn't impressive in the fight, but he definitely gave it his all. In the end, there's nothing you can make an argument for here that tells me anything else. Gruff deserved his spot over Sub-Zero, over Hijinks, maybe even over Hypershock. But if you're looking at it from a TV show point of view, it is between him and P1, and in the end, you're going to choose Gruff. If I had to make predictions on their bracket, who would I say won? Now, I know the first episode's come out, and a lot of my predictions are already incorrect, so let's get into it. First, we had Hydra against Hypershock. I predicted Hypershock because I believed Hypershock would have a really, really upsetting streak. Fortunately, he didn't. I said Gigabyte would beat Malice, which I believe was correct. I said Huge would beat Whiplash. I also had Huge doing extraordinarily well this year. No such luck. Valkyrie, Sub-Zero, I said Valkyrie, that was pretty clear to me. Uppercut, Hijinks, Uppercut for sure. Beta Ribot, I said Beta because who wouldn't say Beta? Let's be honest. So Ribot, I think, destroyed a lot of people's brackets there with that victory. Black Dragon, Slammo, Black Dragon, Mad Cat or Tombstone, Tombstone. Bloodsport Gruff is a talk that a lot of people are having as to who will win. I don't trust Gruff after that Extinguisher fight to stick around the full 3 minutes. I'd love if they proved me wrong, but I'm gonna go Bloodsport. Fusion Tantrum, it depends on what Tantrum does, wedge-wise, but I do think Fusion will win that one. Kraken Sawblaze, I really want to say Kraken, but when it goes to a judge's decision, I do think Sawblaze is much more likely to take it, so Kraken would have to get a KO, essentially, or at least disable Sawblaze's Saw, somehow. I just don't see that happening. Scorpio's Witch Doctor is the talk of the bracket, I think, right now, because I think a lot of people are trying to predict that one more than anybody else. Any other fight. I would say Scorpios because of how weird Witch Doctor's year has been. I'd like to think Witch Doctor'd win. I dislike Witch Doctor a lot, but I do think it's a good enough bot to win, but it feels like a weird season for them, so I think it actually puts Scorpios through, which contradicts my prediction notes that I have here. Copperhead Mammoth is, of course, going to Copperhead. Lockjaw Shatter. Look, for Shatter and Endgame's fights, up until the top 8, they were spoiled by a trailer, I believe, of them fighting. So, unfortunately, that kind of ruins the prediction game. At least I'm pretty sure that's what it was. Somebody commented. So, yeah. Endgame beats Perfect Phoenix. Jackpot Rotator is an interesting fight that I'm not necessarily sure either bot is well enough designed to win. It depends on what Rotator does with his configuration, but I honestly think that I want to say Jackpot wins. Then we had Hypershock Gigabyte, scratch that. It's now Hydra Gigabyte, who Gigabyte will beat. Whiplash Valkyrie now, because Whiplash beat Huge. And yeah, we just saw this fight. Uppercut against Ribot now. Probably gonna go to uppercut. It's probably a much easier fight against Ribot than it would be against Beta. So thank you, Ribot, for giving the the side of the bracket to uppercut. Black Dragon Tombstone. I'm honestly going Tombstone. I do not trust those wheels on Black Dragon to hold long enough for him to do anything to Tombstone. Bloodsport Fusion. Eek. I'll go Bloodsport. Kraken Witch Doctor. I predicted Sawblaze, so let's just change that. And I said Scorpios instead of Witch Doctor. I'm just destroying my notes here. Sawblaze Scorpios is a weird one. I do think Sawblaze is lower, and that's really what Scorpios needs, is to be lower, so I will go Sawblaze there. Copperhead Shatter. I'd predict Copperhead for sure, but unfortunately, again, that was a spoiled fight, so we know Shatter and Endgame make the top 8. Then we have Gigabyte against Whiplash, which I do think Whiplash will win. We have Uppercut Tombstone, which I think Tombstone will win in a big upset. I do think Tombstone will come back this year and still have a good season. Then we have Bloodsport Sawblaze, which I do think Bloodsport is completely fine with, especially after their victory over Scorpios. And lastly, Shatter Endgame, I think is pretty clear that it will go to Endgame. So top 8, or top 4, are Whiplash against Tombstone and Bloodsport Endgame. I don't think Endgame will get his revenge, and I think Tombstone will beat Whiplash for what, is this the 3rd or 4th time? So it is a Tombstone Bloodsport final, and my prediction is Tombstone. I genuinely believe that Tombstone will win that fight. So, there. Tombstone's my champion. Will I be wrong? Most likely, but it is my predictions. After all, I can be as stupid as I want. So I'll see you guys next time, which hopefully is soon because I posted another video today. Or at least I'll try to. Bye.